past week has been a very eventful week for our country. First, we have the remembrance of September the 11th, that day when our nation was attacked by surprise by Al-Qaeda terrorists who hijacked 4 airplanes and flew 2 of them into the World Trade Towers in New York City, flew another into the Pentagon, and a 4th was intended perhaps for the White House, perhaps for Congress, but through the bravery, courage of the passengers, they overpowered the plane, and the plane fell in a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And so we mourn the loss of those who perished on September the 11th. Our minds and hearts are filled with vivid images of the Twin Towers smoking and eventually collapsing to the ground. This past week I listened to a telephone conversation between a gentleman stuck on the 105th floor of the World Trade Tower and an emergency worker. And he was pleading for help, for someone to come, and she tried to assure him that firemen were on their way. It would only be a few moments. He said, the air is getting acrid and it's hard to breathe up here, and there are a number of us up here. And he gave a few names of folks. And then at the end of the audio, you hear him crying out, "Oh God." And with that, you see the visual of the towers collapsing. And that's the end of his life. It's a powerful remembrance. And yet this week, as mournful and as difficult as those images are, we have also been stirred by the religious aspects of this event. When a Muslim cleric has asserted that the Muslims would like to build a mosque within what is called holy ground, within striking distance of Ground Zero in New York City. Many have been, at least many Americans have been upset and offended by that suggestion because of the past history of Islam, that when they conquer a territory, they build a mosque at the site where they have conquered. And fittingly, the new mosque in New York City would be called the Cordoba House, named after the mosque in Spain where a similar mosque was established. The Imam suggests that the significance of this mosque will be for interfaith dialogue, an opportunity for various religious traditions to come together and to speak, perhaps discuss their differences. Many suggest that the Muslim faith is not a violent faith, but rather a peace-loving faith. And they would suggest that they would like to demonstrate that peacefulness through the establishment of this mosque at the foot of Ground Zero. And there are many Americans, including our president, who has asserted the right, the freedom of religion and the right to build a mosque at that location. Our president just said that if we can build a church, a synagogue, a Hindu temple, then we can build a mosque. I'm not persuaded by that logic. It seems to me that it wasn't the Hindu people who launched an attack. It wasn't Christians. It wasn't Jews. It was Muslims. And it seems to me that there's a difference, a significant difference. That being said, the flames of controversy were raised when a Christian pastor in Gainesville, Florida, suggested that he would burn the Koran on September the 11th as a symbol of American rejection of that religion. And an outcry arose over that. The pastor was the pastor of a small congregation of perhaps 50 members, perhaps 30 attending on a Sunday morning. I know something about that. And yet, despite that, his public action brought attention from General Petraeus in Afghanistan to the Secretary of Defense to the President himself. All arguing that this would be a very inflammatory act that would put our troops at great risk. Was this an appropriate protest? Is this the way that the Christian faith advances within the world or argues for its point of view? I would suggest, along with many Christians who spoke with the pastor and tried to persuade him not to do this, that this really is not the way that the Christian faith advances. We proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ, and we persuade those of different faiths to see the truth of the Christian faith as opposed to the futility, the nothingness of other faiths. Isaiah, in his day, addressed a similar situation. Whereas he was not looking in the past at a conflagration, he looked ahead. He saw a coming Holocaust in Jerusalem. He saw a coming day when the city itself will be ravished, laid waste, not just a few buildings, but the whole city. And its populations would be deported to a distant country. Isaiah, rather than looking in the past, looks in the future and says, in view of what is coming, this is what God says. And this is what we need to do. Perhaps so that this judgment might be averted.